Catastrophe. Whether of natural or human cause, catastrophe can strike anywhere, at any time, any one of us.
Could this be the return of the nightmare?
These are the stories that dominate the news. For a few instants, maybe hours and days, they seize our attention. Emergency response is activated. Relief is mobilized. Then what? What happens after the headlines are forgotten? In remote areas like this in Afghanistan, the ravages of war, political upheaval, and natural calamity may not at first be apparent. The rustic tranquility is in fact deceptive. But with a weakened economy, hardly any infrastructure, and no social services to speak of, the region still has desperate needs. Long after each disaster, poor conditions and political instability make it nearly impossible to even think about the future. For those who live here, the simple but essential task of feeding themselves is a daunting challenge. Trying to plow on high mountains or rocky land is very much an uphill struggle. Focus Humanitarian Assistance is an international emergency response agency that looks beyond providing immediate relief to enable people avoid or be prepared for future disasters. Without food aid, people here would suffer even greater hardship, with the specter of starvation an ever-looming presence. To pick up a basic food allowance, isolated villagers make their way to distribution centers. Sometimes this means long treks on foot, by camel, or by donkey across hazardous terrain. Emergency provisions mean enough food for today, while they concentrate on finding ways of feeding themselves tomorrow.
Our food humanitarian assistance is a very, very short-term measure. I mean, in the end, we would hope to be able to provide agricultural inputs and other factors to make people more self-sufficient.
Crop cultivation here has always been difficult. Landslides, earthquakes, and an extreme climate compound the hardships. The soil here has eroded and become so arid that little grows despite the efforts of farmers. If their crops fail and these farmers don't have enough to feed their families, what's likely to happen to them? This farmer says that he will be forced to sell his cattle, his belongings, and even his land. Providing vital humanitarian aid in a region as remote and rugged as this part of Afghanistan is a complicated and arduous operation. Because of bad weather and impassable or non-existent roads, not to mention the occurrence of frequent natural disasters, the distribution of supplies itself is fraught with danger, sometimes impossible.
We are faced with several challenges. One of which is, as you can see right behind us, there's an avalanche. We are currently doing a distribution in Kalaikum, in a district called Shikai in Afghanistan. We can't get there, and in fact this is the same kind of thing that happened to us last year, and we were stuck here for 3 days while people on the Afghan side were waiting and wondering what happened to us. We face many other problems. Sometimes the bank of the river is very, very steep, and we have to pave our own roads down to the riverside before we can cross the wheat to the other side. We have several problems with boats as well. I mean, there are many rocks in the rivers here, and rocks that cannot be easily seen. So when the boats are crossing, they tend to tear very quickly. It takes a lot of management and servicing of equipment to be able to undertake humanitarian aid in this region.
As they distribute essential supplies, Focus volunteers learn how difficult it is to transport people and goods. They learn about the health problems people face and their need for legitimate and productive means of earning a living. And as it works with them to overcome their challenges, Focus helps them find the technical expertise they need. As a result of Focus's efforts, donor agencies and other relief organizations can determine exactly what help is required and where it can be most effective.
For us, it's important to know how people are living, to understand why is their health problem. And if we know how they are living, we know why they have such kind of health problem and how we can solve it, if it's possible. If we know that they have received food, we expect that after that the malnutrition will decrease. And also in the same time, if we notice a malnutrition increasing, we can inform Focus also about this fact.
For people here, time, energy, and the ability to concentrate on longer-term needs are almost as essential as their immediate requirements. Enough food to break out of the cycle of hardship and access to development expertise. This is what Focus Humanitarian Assistance hopes will help these mountain communities build a future after the catastrophe, after the headlines are forgotten. Natural catastrophes are a reality with which many live. Amongst the most vulnerable, however, are those who are least able to anticipate and prepare for them. The high mountain region of the Pamirs, the Karakorum and the Hindu Kush in the heart of Central Asia is particularly prone to earthquakes and landslides. This is Tusion in southeastern Tajikistan, where a slow landslide is causing the ground to move several centimeters a year. This villager has lived here all his life. He says that he's going to move soon. All the houses in the area are threatened. It's getting more and more dangerous. Focus, working with government and local organizations, enables the affected community to improve the engineering of irrigation channels. This and the planting of trees helps stabilize the slopes.
Focus Humanitarian Assistance prefers to take preventive measures, get people prepared to this. We don't want to wait for the people to be covered by a landslide and to rescue them, but we would like to do some projects like slope stabilization or relocation of population to safe places to avoid all the casualties and economic losses.
Lake Sares, 3,000 meters up in the remote Pamir Mountains, was formed by an earthquake nearly 90 years ago. Massive landslides created a natural dam larger than any made by man. Many fear that another rockfall could cause the dam to burst. International experts, who together with Focus went to Lake Sares in June 1999, believe that while the dam is unlikely to break, even an overtopping caused by a landslide would destroy the lives and livelihoods of tens of thousands of people downstream. It would also devastate unique habitats and rare species like the blue leopard and make entire mountain areas uninhabitable for generations. Focus is installing early warning systems and providing the training necessary to mitigate what could be one of the worst natural disasters in human history.
It was the idea to find out what your priorities are.
International organizations working in the area have responded to what Focus has proposed.
Well, Focus has proposed to us to organize an early warning system, or to set up an early warning system, which will prevent that the people in the villages are taken by surprise. They can flee to evacuation areas where they can wait till the crisis is over, or where they can wait till they are being rescued.
In Tajikistan, Focus has a key role in helping those populations prepare for future natural disasters.
We are helping to build the capacity of the government by identifying other problems like lack of technical capability. And this year we are going to provide computer equipment, emergency communication equipment to the State Committee on Emergencies all over the country, not only in Dushanbe. We are conducting workshops, training the State Committee on Emergencies and local NGO staff in training of trainers for disaster management, so that we can expand our pool of trainers and they can work all over the country.
Preparing for future eventualities, even when their timing and magnitude is uncertain, is necessary before the next natural disaster occurs. It's work that continues after the headlines are forgotten.
Humanitäre Katastrophen in Kosovo.
The return of the nightmare.
An uncertain future is also the primary concern of people displaced by civil conflict or political upheaval. The needs of such people, particularly those who find themselves in distant and foreign lands, go beyond food, shelter, and the basics of life. Whilst immediate emergency relief might cater to the needs of today, it doesn't always address the questions of tomorrow. When displaced people such as these from Afghanistan first arrive in a new country, they are often confused, frightened, and disoriented. The trauma and weariness clearly etched on many faces. They're traveling to a focused transit center in Pakistan. Here they receive food, shelter, and clothing. Focus also provides basic health care. They're also taught Urdu, offered job placements, and training in skills which will enable them to quickly become self-reliant in the new and unfamiliar environment in which they find themselves.
We at Focus feel that this is a transition period or maybe a beginning to a new life, and here we want to make it as painless and as smooth for them as possible and yet maintain their dignity. We would like that once they are out of these transit centers, they can get into the jobs and they can, instead of being dependent on someone, they can start living their own life.
In 1999, hundreds of thousands of refugees from Kosovo were driven from their homes, fleeing the country in an extraordinarily short period of time. Many crossed the borders to neighboring countries. Others went further.
How we left Pristina by train. We went in the border first, between Macedonia and Kosovo. We stayed there for 7 days in the border, and it was raining without blanket. It was wet all the land, and from there we went in Stankovac, but they separate us, They sent him in Albania and us in Stankovac, the camp. So we stayed there 2 months or more, and from there we come here.
Awaiting Nadia Zainullahu and her family as they arrived in Calgary from Canadian government transit centers were Focus volunteers and host families.
Le rôle de Focus et des groupes comme Focus, c'est de fournir un encadrement aux nouveaux arrivés, aux nouvelles arrivées. Souvent, quand on parle d'immigration, on parle de la personne qui vient. Et on oublie que la personne qui vient au Canada pour s'établir de nouveau a besoin d'un encadrement. Il a besoin des services de soutien pour qu'il puisse éventuellement contribuer à sa nouvelle société. Et c'est des groupes comme Focus qui rendent cette possibilité une réalité.
Being a stranger in a foreign land isn't easy. The daunting task of finding accommodation and settling into a new home is made easier by volunteers and host families organized by Focus. Adjusting to a new and different way of life means having to adapt to an unfamiliar environment.
This is the south train. Remember we were saying north train and south train? That's south. That goes down to Brentwood and Anderson. Brentwood
There are cultural differences and educational challenges. For Focus, bridging differences and overcoming challenges is what takes humanitarian assistance beyond the obvious and immediate need. Summer schools help children learn the language and provide tutoring in other subjects. Programs are developed to ensure that children are not academically disadvantaged.
Ces enfants sont très intelligents. Le seul problème, c'est la langue française. Ce qu'on essaie de faire à travers justement le programme en ce moment, c'est d'intégrer le français à travers les mathématiques, à travers les jeux. Et à la rentrée, ces élèves-là seront préparés non seulement aux objectifs du ministère, qui sont absolument les mêmes, mais aussi ils vont apprendre à parler français et à socialiser en fait avec tous ces amis, avec tous ces professeurs étrangers qu'on a dans l'école.
Focus assists in finding employment opportunities that match the skills of the new immigrant. For many, new jobs themselves give opportunities for acquiring new skills. A few have even established their own businesses.
I would say that the secret of the success, in my case, is I worked hard, and as much as I could, I saved money, and I had a goal and I had a dream that I wanted to be an independent business owner, and I achieved that.
So what does it take to help people realize their dreams in a new land?
The facts speak for themselves. Our contributors and our donors who give us their financial assistance as well as the time is one of the factors. Our volunteers' professionalism in planning, executing, and looking after the entire program is also a major factor. And if I were to consider another major factor, that is the people themselves. They want to really settle in quickly, be successful Canadian citizens.
I think that time has shown us in Canada, in Quebec, the money we spend in assisting newcomers to integrate our society is an investment because we get more back in the end than we put in. But we have to be patient. It doesn't occur right away. In fact, it may take 10, 20, 30 years for an immigrant to make his contribution. And the contribution won't necessarily be made in the first generation either.
In the face of catastrophe, we are all vulnerable. Wherever it can, Focus enables people to go beyond the immediate crisis and avoid a future one. For Focus humanitarian assistance, after the headlines are forgotten, people are not.
In the summer of 2010, rampaging nature almost tore the heart out of Pakistan.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम, जियो न्यूज़ के साथ मैं हूं तालिब हैदर। पाक फौज के जवानों ने कबू सईद पान कोट अब्दुल जलील बरोही और मुल्का देहात में सैलाबी पानी में घिरे 100 अफराद को महफूज मकामात पर पहुंचा दिया।
Rivers burst their banks, washing away streets and submerging homes in the northwest of the country.
There are 20 million people affected.
Bridges lie broken and roads have been swept away.
4 million people homeless.
Evacuees are showing signs of fever and other waterborne diseases.
Countless dead and 1/5 of the country underwater.
The Aga Khan Development Network immediately mobilized thousands of staff and volunteers to save lives and to heal the wounds. It was the worst flooding in Pakistan's recorded history. The scope and scale of the destruction surpassed even Pakistan's deadly earthquake in 2005. Never before had anyone seen monsoon rains like this. From the far northwest down to Punjab and to Sindh in the south, the mighty Indus River and its tributaries raged out of the mountains, and a wall of water surged down the whole length of the country. It was almost harvest time. The torrent gutted the fields and drowned the crops of Pakistan's breadbasket. It crushed dwellings and bridges, triggered landslides and mudslides. It killed nearly 2,000 people
while they wait for help
and left millions grieving. 3 million homeless, millions hungry.
There's no more food left.
For half of those affected, the need was dire. In the rugged, mountainous north, where roads and bridges are scarce, 2 million people live in scattered communities that are isolated in the best of times. The flood left many of them cut off completely. Key parts of the Karakoram highway lifeline through the mountains were blocked or washed away. With its variety of resources, AKDN was a natural partner for the Pakistani government in this crisis. AKDN's experience in the 2005 earthquake meant it could quickly bring together all its agencies to provide for the needs of those affected. With its disaster response arm Focus Pakistan, working closely with its other agencies, AKDN was uniquely positioned to mobilize resources for early recovery, relief, and rehabilitation.
It was a wonderful experience. They had a lot of expertise, they had a lot of human resource, they had technical resource, and they complemented the government of Pakistan, I think, in a big way. And unfortunately, in case there is some disaster next time, I think we would love to work with the partners like AKDN in general and Focus in particular.
Helicopters from the Aga Khan Foundation probed into remote valleys, bringing food, tents, and blankets. While on the ground, Focus Pakistan's emergency response teams spread out over the rough terrain. The village of Uchust in Chitral of the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, nestled in the Hindu Kush mountain range. Here, a blast of water, mud, and stone took just 20 minutes to destroy 7 houses and kill 13 people.
It came all of a sudden. We had no time even to react. Certain families they were not expecting, so they remained in their houses. Those who remained in their houses, they were gone. About 13 dead bodies is a consequence of the flood. Yes, they were not expecting at all. It never happened in the history of 200 years, at least, of the village. So that was that.
majuma hosta dosirta ke mashirin na wairta mashirin na wairta ate su majani ma pusta kore majuro de awai ma de awai majuro de era before dua jo ke bajat bamara hai madur dana majur kwani to ke so mushkite kan to ke khudai to bad eqlim wanga to de tishin majuro wanga to de jaw ta ma dokhtar
Retired Colonel Surdar Khan, who lives in Uchust, used his experience from service with Focus to save 3 lives.
So immediately, I, along with other fellows of the village, we took out about 3 of them alive. Because we didn't have the pick and shawls, we didn't have any other material with us available. So with the help of hands, we were able to remove the flood, the debris.
After Colonel Khan's call for help on Radio Pakistan, Focus Pakistan was first on the scene. These AKDN first responders are commonly based in areas that most often find themselves in need. Focus Pakistan's highly trained search and rescue teams join forces with community emergency response teams. All these volunteers, men and women, go through regular and rigorous field exercises. Gul Noori, mother of 3, has been a search and rescue team member for more than a decade.
और लोग ये समझते हैं कि औरतें ये काम नहीं कर सकेंगे जब हम काम करते हैं तो लोगों को खुद ब खुद वो हमें देख के ही हैरत हो रही है कि ये औरतें भी मर्दों के मुकाबले में काम कर सकती हैं और हमें मर्दों के मुकाबले में काम करने की बहुत सलाहियत है हमने हर ट्रेनिंग्स किए हैं और जिस तरह का भी मुश्किल काम हो उसकी मुश्किल काम में हम उसी के साथ ही उनके साथ काम करते ही आ रहे हैं
But women rescuers can sometimes make all the difference.
2 एरियाज़ ऐसे हैं जहाँ पे उनके जहन में ये होता है कि औरतें हैं इनके साथ मर्दों का हाथ नहीं लगना चाहिए खालिस औरतें ही इनके साथ काम करें औरतें ही इन ज़ख्मियों को विक्टिम्स को उठाएं तो उसी जगह पे औरतों का हम लेडीज़ को आगे जाना होता है कराची में बस एक बिल्डिंग्स कोलैप्स हो गई थी उसमें तो बहुत सारे लोग गए हुए थे लेकिन उसी जगह के उसी एरिया के लोगों ने कहा कि सिर्फ फोकस वालों को बुला लें क्योंकि फोकस के जगह पे ख़वातीन होती है ख़वातीन ही हमारी खिदमत करेंगे ख़वातीन ही हमारी देखभाल करेंगे खाली फोकस वालों को इधर इसी जगह पे काम करने के लिए आप बुला लें
In many other villages like Uchust, fast action by AKDN agencies saved hundreds of lives. But after the emergency teams have gone, bigger problems persist. Wherever it serves, the AKDN's commitment is broad and long-term.
In a disaster situation, we often just think that people require food assistance or a tent and that's all, but that's not correct. They have a variety of needs. They require health assistance. They require clean water. They require good, efficient sanitation. They require us to help them restore livelihoods. They require us to help them educate their kids. And this, I think, allows the AKDN, which is uniquely placed, to provide for all these needs.
AKDN's philosophy is that people must be enabled to make their own choices, plan their own lives, and be self-reliant enough to help others. The network has an array of agencies to address the different needs of communities. As the disaster swept across the country, Focus, working closely with local organizations, spread early warnings of the threat and helped evacuate thousands of people. Together, Focus, the Ismaili Council for Pakistan, and thousands of volunteers took people from ravaged areas of Gilgit-Baltistan, Chitral, and Sindh to temporary camps. Here, other AKDN agencies came together to support flood victims. Aga Khan Planning and Building Services contributed clean drinking water and sanitation. Children's classes, interrupted by the floods, resumed under the Aga Khan Education Service, Pakistan. The Aga Khan Health Service and the Aga Khan University Hospital provided health care. Health workers also ranged far from the camps, treating diarrhea, pneumonia, skin diseases. Doctors and nurses of the Aga Khan University Hospital in Karachi worked with the government, augmenting the staff of government health facilities in Sindh and Lower Punjab. AKU has treated more than 1 million people in the year since the floods, most of them pregnant women and young children. Their main focus has been on preventing disease and treating malnutrition.
We focus more on educating people rather than giving them medicines blindly. So we focus more on prevention.
For these dedicated men and women, nothing was impossible. The Yasin Gupis Valley in Gilgit-Baltistan was completely cut off by the torrent. Gul Ana of the Aga Khan Health Services in Gilgit knew the only way to get there was on foot. So she did.
मैं इसलिए गुपिस आई क्योंकि मेरी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी थी, मेरी जिम्मेदारी थी यासिन गुपिस के वहाँ हेल्थ केयर जितने भी यूनिट्स हैं उनकी लुक आफ्टर करना। इसलिए मैं जो है ना यहाँ गाकूस से गुपिस 45 किलोमीटर तक मैं चल के गई, यहाँ से गुपिस तक मैं चल के गई। उसकी कंडीशन इससे भी बहुत ख़राब था। उस वक्त बहुत ज़्यादा कीचड़ था, बहुत ज़्यादा मट और फिर पानी आ रहा था, ऊपर से बारिश भी हो रही थी, तो इसमें हम चल के गए थे आगे।
Here in Hopper, she helped deliver a baby, and then by rope and pulley crossed the valley to find more people needing help. In Yungal, 18-year-old Dilshad Wali was suffering prolonged labor pains with complications. Gulana knew she had to get to a medical center soon, or both mother and child would die. She convinced a neighbor with a motorcycle to take Dilshad to the Aga Khan Health Center in Sumal in time to give birth to little Naeem, today a healthy child. Out of the many thousands in Gilgit-Baltistan who were cut off, 3,500 lived in Darkut in Yasin district. The village went from this to this in just a few days. A rocky graveyard of homes and fields buried by the landslides.
पर डर रहे थे कि अब क़यामत आ गई, अभी बचने का कोई
ये सोचता
मुमकिन नहीं था।
क्या कह रहे हैं? हम में से कोई भी नहीं बचेगी, अब सब मरेंगे।
Many people fled to higher, safer ground, where they went without food for 2 days. When they returned, they found 14 homes and a Jamaat Khana reduced to rubble. 2/3 of their livestock and most of their wheat and maize crop were gone. Gone was any chance of feeding themselves for a long time. Townspeople walked 15 kilometers down the mountains in search of food. They met AKDN volunteers who were trying to get through with food and other supplies. Twice the volunteers had to unload to cross broken bridges. Together they tracked back up the mountain, bearing hope on their backs.
बहुत मुश्किल रास्ता था, वहाँ पर भी सैलाब था। उस सैलाब से इधर करने के लिए
रास्ते नहीं थे, पानी थे हर जगह में, कीचड़ था, तो ऊपर पहाड़ के चढ़ना पड़ा, फिर ऊपर से नीचे आना पड़ा, इस तरह से हमने लाया।
Today, Darkut has started to bloom again. There's less need for food aid. But some townspeople question whether it is worthwhile to rebuild here, only to have catastrophe inevitably strike again. Their doors lead to nowhere.
असल में मेरी मजबूरी है, क्योंकि मैं इस इलाकों में यहाँ पे पैदा हुआ हूँ, लेकिन इसलिए छोड़ रहा हूँ, यहाँ पे सहूलत नहीं है। लेकिन अब बाहरी में आ गए हैं, ये बाहर है, लेकिन नवंबर के बाद यहाँ पे 8 फुट बर्फ़ होती है, इंसान को फिर आगे स्लाइडिंग हो रही है। सर, मैं यहाँ पे किस तरह रहूँगा?
There is no easy answer. Protecting a vulnerable village against natural disasters is hard and expensive. So is resettling people when there is so little land that is safe, fertile, and affordable. For generations, Hossainabad, just across the Karakoram highway, has lived in harmony with nature. Until nature pitched down a hail of boulders. While giant boulders crashed through her house, Goha Norma grabbed her children and fled.
स्लाइडिंग के दौरान मैंने ऊपर देखा, ज़्यादा स्लाइडिंग हो रही थी, तो मैंने बच्चों के हाथ पकड़ के, एक पता नहीं, एक पाँव से एक पाँव में चप्पल थी, दूसरे पाँव में चप्पल ही नहीं नज़र आ गई। मुझे चप्पल भी छोड़ के मैंने भागी। बच्चों को लेके, इसको तो मैंने पीठ पे लेके एक दूसरे बच्चे को हाथ पकड़ के जल्दी भागी जान बचाने के लिए। बहुत ख़तरा हो गया, मुझे बहुत डर लग गया।
They and their neighbors spent the winter in transitional camps set up by the AKDN and the government.
टेंट में इतनी सर्दी हो रही थी, तेज़ बर्फ़बारी हो रही थी, बाहर निकलना भी मुश्किल था हमें वॉशरूम अटेंड करने के लिए। हाथ पांव इस तरह बिल्कुल काम नहीं कर रहे थे, इतनी सर्दी थी। हम गर्म कपड़े भी इतने नहीं थे, फिर वो हमने चादर कंबल ओढ़ के बैठ रहे थे। इतनी सर्दी थी, आम सर्दी नहीं, हमारे गांव में बहुत सर्दी हो रही है। बहुत ज़्यादा सर्दी की वजह से काफ़ी बच्चे बीमार थे।
Now, thanks to AKPBS, they live in much better conditions. In sturdy shelters at the foot of Rakaposhi, a majestic and innocent-looking peak of the Karakoram range. The shelters are insulated and warm, with indoor toilets and fuel-efficient stoves with water warming facilities. The agency has housed 1,000 families in Gilgit-Baltistan and Chitral. But it's not enough. It's not home.
शेल्टर्स में बस घर का जैसा माहौल ही, बस तकरीबन बस घर जैसा है हमारे लिए। यहाँ छत मिला और खाने पीने की चीज़ें हमारे लिए मुहैया करते हैं इदारा वाले, और गवर्नमेंट वालों का भी शुक्रिया अदा करते हैं, क्योंकि वो भी हमारे जानों के लिए कुछ ना कुछ तो कर सकते हैं, करते आए हैं अभी तक। जो अगर आगे मुस्तकबिल के लिए सोचा जाए तो फिर हम इस तरह शेल्टर्स में गुजारा नहीं कर सकते हैं।
We can say that for 1 to 2 years we can say people or families can live in it, but it is not the permanent solution.
In Sindh, the AKPBS has provided nearly 3,000 shelters, but it is looking to the long term, to flood victims retaking control of their lives.
They've lost everything. You can't let them go until you've actually rebuilt their lives. And this is not a 2-month or 3-week or even a 6-month process.
In Kadari Bil, it's a partnership. Donors provide the funding, AKPBS provide the expertise, and the beneficiaries provide the labor. Here, they're working hard to create clean, safe, and hygienic conditions to prevent diseases and improve the quality of life. The UN agency UNICEF reported during the floods that 3.5 million children were at risk from waterborne diseases. For the first time, these women in Sindh have access to private toilets, giving them dignity and privacy.
असां बाथरूम पहिरीं कोन हुआ असीं खुले जंग में वेठा हुआसीं ॿाहिरि ई ॿाहिरि हा बेशर्म थियो असीं जंगल में वेठा हुआसीं पोइ मर्द ईंदा हुआ की छा पईंदा हुआ पोइ असीं मजबूर हुआसीं पोइ असीं ॿाहिरि खुले मैदान ते वेठा हुआसीं कुझु बि न को बाथरूम हो न को कुझु बि कोन हो असांखे हे बाथरूम सही लॻनि था सुठा लॻनि था ॾाढो इज़त वारा बाथरूम आहिनि हा असीं ज़ाइफ़ाऊं इन मंझि जे असीं अचूं थी कंहिं प्याल लकान त असांखे इज़त वारो लॻे थो पनाह वारो लॻे थो असांखे ॾाढा सुठा लॻनि था आगा ख़ान असांजे लॻा सभु कुझु करे मोकिलियो आहे
The Aga Khan Rural Support Program has had a different role to play, rehabilitating the land so that the farmers can get back their means of livelihood and their independence. Up in Chitral, long-term food security is extra vital for isolated communities.
People depend on the subsistence farming. These crops are the source of their income, they feed on these crops throughout the year.
Not only did the floods wash away the crops, they left the fields in ruins. For AKRSP, it was as much a matter of engineering as of agriculture.
A year ago, I think it would present a ground like, I would say, this one, or worse than this, and the big boulders down there, it's all full of boulders. So it was not possible for the poor villager to develop his land.
AKRSP brought the community together and provided both funds and know-how. Villagers supplied the labor, and together they reclaimed the land. All part of AKDN's pioneering community-based approach to development.
We have to make the land even, level. We have to transport mud from high altitude to lower ones. We have to remove the stones, and big stones were required to be blasted, and channels were to be excavated.
Today, Uchust can start feeding itself. To revive livelihoods, AKRSP also has had to restore roads and bridges for access to cut-off villages, and to protect water supplies for irrigation and drinking. Take this community in Zulfi Karabat, near Gilgit. 38,000 people rely on this irrigation station. AKRSP reinforced the wall that shields the irrigation system from the river during flood times. The Rural Support Program has worked on 600 such projects for roads and water security during the year after the flood. And the end is not in sight. It is never in sight. So long as nature lashes out and people are in need. Again in 2011, floods have raged through Pakistan, afflicting more than 7 million people, many of them still trying to recover from the previous year. Houses, fields, orchards and businesses have to be rebuilt from scratch. And again, resources are strained.
We have a moral responsibility to ensure that we actually deliver the services to these distressed communities. We can't just leave them abandoned to nature. And I think it is a moral obligation on us, it's our ethical responsibility to ensure that we reach all these communities. Not a single person should be untouched by our assistance.